Encountering information that aligns with your expectations produces a small reward in the brain, a brief pulse of validation that makes you more likely to like, comment, or res hair. Each of those actions teaches the recommendation system a little more about your preferences. Your feed narrows, not because you demanded it, but because both your psychology and the algorithm co-evolve toward agreement. Over time, this repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity itself makes claims feel more trustworthy. What makes the risk greater today is how technology extends beyond feeds. Generative AI systems can already create personalized outputs on demand, shaping responses in ways that match a person's prior views. These tools don't just mirror past clicks, they generate new material that fits specific beliefs. Researchers have warned that such personalization could increase the impact of confirmation bias, offering hyper-tailored support for whatever narrative someone brings in. This doesn't merely deepen echo chambers, it makes the chambers adaptive in real time. When these layers combine, human attention, algorithmic curation, and AI-driven personalization, the outcome is stark. Whole groups can inhabit separate realities, without ever colliding in a shared space of reference. The polarization visible in today's online debates is less the product of deliberate division than a consequence of thousands of small reinforcements, multiplied endlessly by automated systems. And yet, it's important to see the structure here. Confirmation bias alone would predispose people to selective reasoning in any environment. But in digital spaces, where design favors engagement, that bias grows into large-scale echo chambers. What feels like independent discovery is often the product of pathways configured to amplify belief rather than challenge it. This helps explain why online debates can feel irresolvable from the very start. Participants are not only drawing from different sets of evidence, they live within parallel systems that present the world differently. That divergence turns each attempt at persuasion into frustration. What looks like a discussion about facts is also a clash of lenses, shaped by bias and maintained by digital design. The next step is to look more closely at what happens once people enter direct exchanges, because when those echo chambers collide in arguments, the results tend to feel even more futile. Why online arguments feel futile? Why do online debates so often feel like running in circles? Whether it's a long Facebook thread or a Reddit back and forth, the pattern is familiar. Someone makes a claim, a challenger joins in, and what starts as a quick disagreement turns into dozens of exchanges that never go anywhere. By the end, both sides feel more certain of their own stance and more frustrated with the other. What looks like conversation rarely produces actual movement. The problem is partly built into the shape of online arguments. One person posts, the other counters, and soon both sides reframe what they already said, insisting they've been misunderstood. Each reply raises the emotional stakes while repeating the same points in different words. Instead of convergence, the disagreement hardens. To an outside reader, these threads resemble two speeches delivered at each other, rather than an exchange meant to resolve anything. Careful studies of online forums have confirmed this impression. Analysts found that persuasion almost never happens late in an argument. The Change My View community, which has been studied extensively, shows a clear threshold. Once two people have exchanged more than 4 replies apiece, the odds of meaningful change nearly vanish. In practice, that means if you've gone back and forth 4 times and nothing has shifted, it's smarter to step away than to keep pushing. The data suggest additional replies don't increase the chance of progress. They decrease it. Why does this happen? One major reason is that public arguments shift the goal from learning to performance. Offline, a trusted friend might correct you quietly, and you'd adjust without much effort. But in a visible thread, everything you say is tied to an audience. That makes the disagreement about image as much as information. Backing down in front of onlookers feels like losing, so most participants double down instead. When conversations play out on a stage, defending identity usually outweighs reconsidering evidence. This audience effect combines with sunk cost thinking and personal attachment to beliefs. The longer you've argued, the more invested you feel in standing firm. If others are cheering you on with likes or replies, the social cost of conceding rises even higher. Together, these forces explain why so many debates stretch out pointlessly. At that stage, people are not reasoning, they're signaling. That insight points toward what to do differently. If you sense you're locked in one of these spirals, treat the 4-reply mark as a hard stop. Beyond that point, your chances of persuading someone dwindle fast. Another useful tactic drawn from successful Change My View posts, is to avoid repeating an opponent's claims verbatim. Instead, reframe the idea in new language when offering a correction. This sidesteps the memory trap, where repeating the falsehood only makes it feel more familiar. Limiting replies and shifting language doesn't guarantee success, but it makes genuine reflection more likely than endless repetition. Seen this way, the exhaustion people feel after long comment wars makes sense. Each side believes that not replying would equal defeat, so the cycle keeps pulling them forward. Yet all the extra energy poured into citations and counterarguments rarely changes anything. By the end, participants walk away drained, with their original beliefs reinforced rather than questioned. The futility of these arguments is not simply personal, it's systemic. Social platforms treat every response as engagement to be amplified. That means heated threads are pushed into more feeds, drawing more onlookers, and creating stronger pressure to perform rather than revise views. What looks like lively discussion in the metrics is in reality a loop that deepens division. Understanding this pattern helps explain why so many digital debates never reach resolution. The psychology of defending identity and the structural incentives of the platforms both work against persuasion. Arguments don't collapse because people are irrational in principle. They collapse because once they become performances, persuasion is nearly impossible. This is why internet arguments feel futile. They are designed, socially and technologically, to reward visibility and endurance rather than reflection and change. And if even ordinary debates can leave people stuck and frustrated, the effect becomes even stronger with information that triggers powerful emotions. Before long, scrolling turns into confrontation with headline after headline designed to alarm. To understand why we often find ourselves caught in that specific loop, it helps to look at how the brain is wired to respond when digital feeds constantly highlight threats. Doomscrolling and the brain's threat radar. Why is it that, late at night, when you know you should be resting, you end up scrolling through headlines that make you anxious? You tell yourself it'll just be one more story, but that turns into another and another. Before long, half an hour, or more, has slipped away. This behavior has become so common it now has a name, doomscrolling. But as modern as it feels, the roots of this habit stretch back far before smartphones. The pull comes from ancient survival systems in the brain that once helped humans detect and respond quickly to danger. From an evolutionary standpoint, noticing threats first made perfect sense. Thousands of years ago, failing to spot a predator or an oncoming storm could mean disaster, while missing a bit of good news carried no cost. Over time, the human brain developed a built-in attentional bias toward the negative. This is why even in today's digital world, warnings and alarming stories demand our attention more forcefully than neutral or uplifting content. Our old survival wiring still pushes us to scan for hazards, even when those hazards are just headlines. Neuroscience helps explain why doomscrolling locks us in so effectively. At the center of the brain's threat radar is the amygdala, a structure that specializes in detecting emotionally significant information, especially signals of fear and danger. When you scroll past a story about political unrest, environmental disaster, or health risk, the amygdala engages immediately, flagging it as something that needs attention. You may not enjoy reading the update, but your attention sticks because the brain treats it as vital to survival. What makes the loop stickier is that another system kicks in alongside the amygdala, the brain's reward circuitry. Dopamine, often associated with pleasant rewards, also spikes during the anticipation of something new. Each swipe promises another piece of information. Maybe it's the detail that explains the current crisis. Maybe it's a developing update. That, what's next? Anticipation nudges dopamine upward, and the combination of fear and anticipation locks you to the feed. It is less that you want the bad news itself, and more that your brain rewards the search for the next thing. This dual process, threat detection and reward anticipation, creates a loop that's hard to escape. The amygdala keeps you on alert, signaling that perceived dangers need monitoring, while dopamine provides a little push to keep checking in case relief or resolution is just another scroll away. Together, they wire a cycle where you feel both uneasy and compelled, tired but unwilling to stop. With infinite content available, the cycle can, in theory, continue indefinitely. Studies have confirmed that this pattern isn't rare. By 2025, surveys show daily screen time rising again compared to just a few years prior, with a marked increase in late-night news consumption. Younger users, especially, report staying up far past midnight cycling through crisis-driven content. Importantly, doom scrolling doesn't just burn time. It's tied to measurable drops in mental well-being. For instance, research reported in 2023 and 2024 found consistent links between habitual doom scrolling and higher levels of existential anxiety, along with greater signs of depression and hopelessness. In other words, spending more time with negative feeds doesn't simply expose you to bad news. It magnifies distress and leaves you more vulnerable to rumination long after logging off. Why does the mood crash so intensely? The issue is that the brain doesn't process each alarming headline in isolation. Seeing stories about a hurricane in one region, conflict in another, and health scares at home, all in a row, creates the impression of a world filled with non-stop, inescapable danger. The amygdala responds as if the threats are all present at once, heightening vigilance, keeping the nervous system aroused, and disrupting rest. That's why after a night absorbed in grim news, the body feels restless, the mind refuses to settle, and sleep becomes elusive. The design of digital platforms intensifies this phenomenon. Recommendation systems measure what captures attention, and since negative content tends to hold viewers longer, algorithms learn to feed it back more often. What begins as a single look at breaking news slowly reshapes the feed into a concentrated stream of crises. The experience of doom scrolling isn't just staying updated with world events. It's interacting with a system optimized to reinforce and prolong your attention by keeping you on alert. It's tempting to frame doom scrolling as nothing more than poor discipline. Just log off, the logic says. But neuroscience suggests otherwise. The urge to keep scanning the feed comes directly from adaptive mechanisms that once kept our species alive. The problem is not that the brain is defective, but that an ancient survival tool is colliding with an environment designed to exploit it. Unlike the natural world, where alertness could fade once the danger passed, online feeds present no endpoint. With each new refresh, uncertainty continues, and the brain that longs for closure never receives it. That's why this habit feels so difficult to break. Each swipe carries a promise. Maybe the next update will explain, or solve, or assure. Instead, each swipe usually leads to another source of unease. The search for safety or clarity never resolves, yet the brain keeps anticipating that it might. In many ways, doom scrolling is the modern manifestation of the age-old vigilance that helped ancestors scan dark forests for predators. The difference is that the digital forest has no edge. Recognizing doom scrolling as a biological loop, rather than just a lack of willpower, can also point toward ways to interrupt it. Small environmental changes matter more than pure self-control because they cut the feedback cycle off before it escalates. Researchers and healthcare groups share a few low-effort adjustments that are practical starting points. One is to experiment with muting app notifications for a single evening. Another is to physically move your phone out of arm's reach when you go to bed, forcing a pause before you can check it impulsively. A third tip is to set your phone's display to grayscale mode at night, dulling the visual cues that keep the brain expecting stimulation. These aren't moral rules, but experiments, ways to test if removing small triggers helps you feel calmer and more in control. What these micro-interventions share is a shift in the environment, not an attempt to overrule ancient instinct with sheer will. By lowering the constant triggers that activate the amygdala and reward circuitry, they put enough distance between you and the feed to allow your attention system to cool down. Even trying one of these adjustments for a single night can reveal how much difference it makes when negative content isn't constantly within reach. Seen in this light, doom scrolling isn't about weakness, it's about instinct and design colliding. A brain equipped to survive threats is operating in a space where threat signals are manufactured endlessly and fed back for profit. What feels like a late-night quirk is actually a durable cycle shaped by both evolutionary wiring and technological incentives. This raises a broader question about online life. If even frightening headlines can lock our attention so powerfully, what about seemingly trivial signals? The likes, shares, and notifications scattered through our feeds? They should be meaningless, yet somehow they capture us just as strongly. Understanding why those small icons matter so much requires looking at how the brain's reward systems respond in real time. The neuroscience of likes and shares. Why do small digital signals like a heart, a thumbs up, or a share icon create such a strong pull on our attention? They have no direct material value. You can't eat them, spend them, or use them in place of real-world resources. Yet many people check for them repeatedly, sometimes refreshing a post every few minutes to see if the response has grown. This behavior looks trivial from the outside, but inside the brain it ties directly into circuits that evolved to reinforce actions with social value. Likes and shares act less like decorations and more like triggers in a loop of anticipation and reward. At the center of that loop is dopamine, a neurotransmitter often misunderstood as the pleasure chemical. What research makes clear is that dopamine is not about the satisfaction itself. It's about motivation and the anticipation of reward. Each time you share a thought or upload an image, your brain marks an open-ended question. Will anyone respond? A notification acts as a small confirmation that your action mattered and sets off activity in reward pathways. The sense of anticipation can be just as strong, sometimes stronger, than the outcome itself. Intermittent reinforcement strengthens this loop. Likes don't come at predictable rates. Some posts draw dozens of responses, others only a few, and the randomness keeps people refreshing to check. Researchers often compare this structure to gambling, since slot machines use the same principle of unpredictable payoffs. The parallel isn't meant to imply that social media is identical to gambling or drug use, but the underlying neural mechanism overlaps. Anticipation driven by dopamine makes the behavior habit-forming. Each alert or refresh becomes a cue signaling the possibility of reward, which encourages more checking. Brain imaging research reinforces this picture. fMRI work, including studies by Sherman and colleagues, shows that both receiving and giving likes activate reward-related areas, such as the ventral striatum, the ventral tegmental area, and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. These are the same circuits that respond to other types of social reinforcement, like smiles or verbal approval. What matters here is not the size of the stimulus, but its social meaning. Even symbolic interactions can activate the same networks that motivated human connection long before digital platforms existed. The data highlight that a heart icon doesn't operate as a meaningless pixel. It engages brain regions tied to belonging. In evolutionary terms, being accepted and supported by a group carried real advantages for survival. Today, a like or a share resembles that same signal in miniature. It assures the brain that the user remains part of a social circle. For young users, whose reward systems are still developing, these responses generate especially strong bursts of activity, but adults show the effect as well. Reward circuits remain responsive across the lifespan, which is why the appeal persists at every age. Where things become more complex is when expected attention does not arrive. Research in 2025 shows that low engagement, compared to what a user anticipated, activates neural patterns often associated with social exclusion or rejection. This means that not getting likes is not just neutral, it can be experienced by the brain as a subtle sting. As a result, users are caught in a two-sided system. Dopamine drives the search for positive reinforcement, while parallel systems react to a lack of responses with discomfort. That mix explains why so many people keep checking numbers, chasing approval, and avoiding rejection simultaneously. Over time, repeated cycles of posting, waiting, and reacting form habits. The mind learns to link content creation not with intrinsic value, but with external metrics. When a post performs, the response produces heightened motivation.